The United States Supreme Court handed victories to the Trump administration in two high-profile immigration cases. So let's break it down. First, the High Court paused the return of a Maryland father deported to a prison in El Salvador. And second, the court cleared the way for mass deportation flights of alleged Venezuelan gang members to continue, but there are some conditions to talk about there. CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang asked Attorney General Pam Bondi about this and about our CBS News reporting on the backgrounds of some of those who you see here deported. Here's that exchange.
Attorney General, 60 Minutes found that 75% of the immigrants who were sent to El Salvador do not have public criminal record. Is that true?
Do you mean in our country?
The Venezuelan migrants who were sent to...
Okay, well, they're not Venezuelan migrants. They're illegal aliens from Venezuela who should not have been in our country, who are committing the most violent crimes. So if you committed a murder in our country, we're going to keep you here, and we're going to seek the death penalty, and we're going to keep you in prison because our victims' families deserve that. But we don't have to charge them with every crime. We can deport them and get them out of our country and save room in our prisons because they should have never been in our country to begin with.
So you confirm they didn't commit a crime, right? Is that what you're confirming?
And off she goes. So let's bring in CBS News Justice correspondent Scott MacFarlane. Scott, more about that in just a minute. But first, you've got some breaking news on this latest Supreme Court ruling.
Yeah, the Supreme Court has paused a lower court's order that would return a whole bunch of federal workers to the job, those probationary workers, those newer workers who were laid off but who had challenged the layoffs through the court system. These include workers from the Defense Department and the VA, some of the larger agencies. The Supreme Court has deemed they want to put all that on hold, the return of those workers. In the ruling, the initial read of the ruling, it's because they don't believe those particular plaintiffs are the right ones to be challenging this in the court. So until they can hash this out further and go back to the drawing boards of these legal arguments, the return of those workers, the court order they come back to the job, is paused, which means those workers would remain home or would remain in some form of limbo at those agencies.
So is it more a question of procedure rather than arguing the merits of the case where this one's concerned?
It has that feel. This is an issue involving the parties. Is it the proper party to file a suit?
Right.
If you go to court and you want to sue for something, they're going to make sure, the judges are, that you are the proper person to be taking this action against another organization. This is a freeze of a lower court order, which means the litigation is almost certain to continue.
All right, good to button that one up. Let's get back to those deportation flights. That's been talked about so much. The scrutiny has been so intense. What conditions did the Supreme Court say that they used to come to this decision?
Yeah, the Supreme Court is taking another one of those lower court matters and trying to figure out what to do about it. And they have ruled in a 5-4 ruling that the administration can resume the use of this 1798 Alien Enemies Act to expedite deportations across the country. That's a law that hadn't been employed since World War II and the internment of World War II. The court says it is in the executive's power to use it, but the justices add a big caveat that the other side thinks is a victory. They've said you have to have due process for these detainees, for those who'd be evicted or deported through the Alien Enemies Act. They have to have the right to challenge it. That wasn't the case in those March 15th deportations. At least one mistake was made in the March 15th deportations. If you can challenge it in court, you're less likely to have some form of a mistake made. So both sides are claiming victory here in what was a high-stakes initial legal showdown over those March 15th deportations and potentially Alien Enemies Act deportations to come.
Well, when both sides proclaim victory, that means we continue to have stories to tell for the days ahead. I want to ask you about this. How are you reading? The judge at the center of the legal battle over the mass deportations has canceled a hearing set for today.
Yeah, that was in Washington, D.C. The chief judge here in Washington, D.C. had a hearing on whether we should resume those Alien Enemies Act deportations inside the administration. And the judge kind of lost the jurisdiction a bit because the Supreme Court said no. This shouldn't be in Washington, D.C. This case, if it's going to be argued, should be argued in Texas or Louisiana, where those deportees were being held before they were put on the planes. So it's an issue of jurisdiction. You have to be in the right place to file a lawsuit. Those who are challenging this Alien Enemies Act procedure, the plaintiffs' attorneys are almost certain to refile their lawsuit. The challenge of this in Texas or somewhere in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals.
Interesting. So the courts are literally looking at this through people, places, before they talk about the things. Let's look at the case of the Maryland father deported by mistake. What was the court's reasoning for pausing his return to the United States? And then what's next here, Scott?
For now, this thing's on hold. It could be on hold just for another few hours. It's possible the Supreme Court comes down with some guidance as to what it thinks should happen or what it's ordering to have happen in the lower courts. You'll recall here, this is quite a standoff between the Trump administration and a lower court. A Maryland judge ordered the Trump administration to return that man, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, from an El Salvador prison to the United States. The administration has said they can't because he's in El Salvador now, outside of the court's jurisdiction. That showdown is now in the hands of the Supreme Court. They could give guidance as early as today as to what they think should happen or what they're ordering to have happen. But it also could slide later in the week. And in the meantime, that standoff continues and Abrego Garcia remains locked up in El Salvador.
CBS News Department of Justice correspondent Scott MacFarlane, thank you. Good to talk to you today.